Going into Season 2 of the Overwatch League, expansion teams had two burning questions that they had to answer. The first one is obvious. How are you going to win? This can be answered pretty easily just by looking at the players that they picked up. The second question, however, is a lot more abstract. Why should we care? After all, you're a brand new team going into a league with 12 already established fan bases. How are you going to convince people to jump ship and root for your team instead? You could accomplish this by picking up players with large pre-existing fan bases like the Reign did, but getting these players can be very expensive, and you run the risk of losing those fans when that player leaves. On the other hand, you could put your all into branding, marketing, and social media presence, figure out a niche that needs to be filled in the community, and go after it wholeheartedly. This route takes more effort, but if successful, it will draw tons of dedicated fans to your team who will root for you regardless of the players or the record. Many expansion teams tried to do this, but none of them were as successful as the Hangzhou Spark. And that was just the beginning. The Hangzhou Spark are owned by Bilibili, which is a massive video sharing company based in China. From what I can tell by looking at the website, they're basically Chinese YouTube, but don't let that fool you. Esports is not an entirely new venture for them. In 2017, Bilibili bought a successful League of Legends team called iMei, and has been operating in their LPL slot as Bilibili Gaming ever since. While Bilibili Gaming isn't the best team in China, they have put up some very respectable results, showing that this company knows how to run a successful esports team. So, how did Bilibili decide to market their Overwatch League team? Well, just look at it. Their cotton candy pink and blue color scheme, the cutesy anime-like art style on their Twitter banner, the adorable stylized Bilibili and SiR mascots, heck, even the logo itself is an anime reference. Yeah, you heard that right. It's a reference to an anime called Towaru Kagaku no Railgun, where the main character, Misaka Mikoto, can shoot this electromagnetic beam from her fingers, hence her codename, the Railgun. Not convinced? Check out this official concept art. A logo for a team called the Hangzhou Railgun. Yeah, this team leaned hard into cute and into anime. They knew that there were a lot of people in the Overwatch community who would like this, and it worked incredibly well. In a league of mostly serious, gritty logos, Hangzhou's light and vibrant approach to their branding was a breath of fresh air. Because of that, they were one of the most popular expansion teams from the minute that their logo was made public. But of course, you can't have a team based on logo alone, so who would be making up the Hangzhou Spark? When I look at the Spark and their team building strategy, it reminds me the most of the Season 1 London Spitfire, who merged their own C9 Kongju team with the Apex champion GC Busan in order to make a hybrid super team. The Spark, however, chose two teams that weren't quite as notorious. Main tank Nosmite, flex tank Rhea, hitscan Godsby, flex support Bebe, and head coach Mask all came from X6 Gaming. To be fair, X6 Gaming has been a successful team in Overwatch. They've been around since Apex Season 3 and won Contenders 2018 Season 1. This would be great if they were picked up right after that victory, but the team suffered a huge fall from grace in Season 2, just barely making the playoffs and getting knocked out in the first round. These players could be great, assuming they recapture their Season 1 form. Then you had Flex DPS Adora, hitscan Bazi, Flex Support Revenge, and Assistant Coach Supreme, who all came from 7. Now, look, I didn't watch these players in Contenders. Maybe they were all great individually, but the results as a team aren't too promising. 7 was one of those teams who were consistently placing low in Contenders, but then when they got to Trials, they'd usually place high enough to get back into Contenders. No one was really sure what to expect out of these players in this new environment. But, of course, that wasn't it. No, as the team wanted to appeal to their home fanbase, they picked up a few very promising players from Contenders China. The first was IDK, who was the best main support in the region at the time. Along with his team Lucky Future Zenith, IDK was dominating the region. The second was Crystal, a very promising flex DPS prospect from T1W, and finally, Guxue. This one was big. Just before his acquisition, Guxue was probably the biggest breakout star of the Overwatch World Cup. He wowed spectators with his incredible Winston mechanics, especially with Primal Rage, and he stood up to some of the best in the world on Reinhardt as well. With his performance, it was only a matter of time before he got signed, and with this signing came a flashy main tank player who had a lot of preseason hype, something that the Spark didn't really have with most of the players they signed. So, while there were a lot of questions about some of the players that the Spark picked up, like the players from 7, as well as some concern over the language barrier, there was a lot of optimism about the Spark's preseason chances. Players like Guxue, Godsby, and IDK are all really good, and while you could only take Scrimbucks so far, the Spark had a lot of them in the preseason. Like, supposedly they were just owning. Because of all that, the Spark were rated within the top half of the league in most preseason power rankings, with some placing them as high as the top 2. It is worth mentioning that in the beginning of Stage 1, the Spark added one more member to their roster, Sassin. Sassin is a flex player. He's played both DPS and off-tank at a high level, but Fox's and White Whale Incheon, his former teams, were never very good, so he must have been scouted individually. Sassin barely ended up playing this season, but maybe we'll end up seeing him pop off in Season 3. When the rest of the Spark hit the stage though, the result was a lot less explosive than advertised. Don't get me wrong, there was a lot to like about the Spark. For example, Rio was a very pleasant surprise to start off the season, consistently popping off in his first couple of games. IDK was great too, working together with Rio beautifully to pull off those boot bomb combos. Godsby was doing a pretty good job on Zarya, and oh my gosh, the game day graphics. Seriously, I need a minute just to talk about these. Before every game, the Hangzhou Spark would come out with this beautiful pre-game graphic that showed their mascots either confronting the mascots of the team they were facing, or getting ready to do something that was significant to the city that they were from. After the game, a second graphic was posted to follow up on the first graphic. If the team won, their mascot succeeded in the confrontation or activity, but if they lost, they failed. These graphics clearly had a ton of research, effort, and passion behind them, and it paid off. They were both creative and beautiful. It's yet another reason why so many undecided Overwatch League fans flocked to the Spark, but more importantly, it made other teams think about how they could improve in that department. In Season 2, we saw a lot of different teams putting more effort into their game day and hype graphics, hiring artists and graphic designers to create some beautiful pieces, and the Hangzhou Spark were at the forefront of this movement. So for that, I really have to give a ton of credit to their art team. Thank you guys, really. You know what I can't thank though? The players. There were some big problems. The Spark swapped back and forth between Guxue and No Smite constantly, and main tank is probably the worst position to be switching, because more than any other position, the playstyle of the main tank affects the entire team. And the Spark's main tanks had two very different styles, with Guxue preferring to be more aggressive and No Smite wanting to be more passive. There was a lot of individual talent on the Spark. That much was clear, but maybe it was nerves or maybe it was the language barrier, but the Spark had some massive communication and synergy issues in the early parts of the season.
Like, look at this. Godsby's like, I'm pushing, and No Smite is literally holding the S key.
No Smite goes this way.
Yeah,
everyone else goes that way.
Like, what the... What's he doing?
No Smite is not just round this corner, he's round that corner.
What's he doing? I saw this live and I was like, what in the
Because of this, the Spark stumbled to a disappointing 3 and 4 start, and had a lot of questions to answer as they moved forward. Stage 2 is where the Spark really began to come together. How? By leaning into their Chinese players. It was Stage 2 where the Spark finally committed to Guxue as their main tank and played with him full time. This allowed the team to really start building up synergy with Guxue and his more aggressive playstyle. In addition, the team started swapping in Crystal for Bazzi, who was a huge help in off-meta comps. It seems like this dude could play anything, and play it at a very high level. It's also worth mentioning that this was a really good schedule to rebound off of. Other than games against the Shock and the Titans, the rest of the stage was filled with teams that had losing records. They even finished off the stage with a nice quality win against the Dynasty. On the other hand, none of these games were particularly convincing. The Spark didn't get a single 4-0 in Stage 2. In fact, 3 of their 5 wins came in Map 5. Were they just clutch? Maybe, but a really good team should be putting away these teams entirely. This was the first time ever, as far as I can tell, that a team made an Overwatch League stage playoff with a negative map differential. Maybe that's why most fans didn't take them very seriously going into the playoffs. But Hangzhou took advantage of the chance that they were given. Coming in as the 7th seed, the Spark had to go up against the Atlantic champion London Spitfire. And man, I mean, the Spitfire didn't play particularly well in this game, but credit where it's due, the Spark did a very good job of capitalizing off of their mistakes. Hangzhou won this game 3-1 and advanced to the semi-finals, where they got destroyed by the Shock, but that's not important. The important part is that the Spark were finally starting to make waves, and that persona they had of being the happy-go-lucky pink anime team was starting to crack, showing glimpses of a truly formidable title contender. While Stage 2 saw Hangzhou venture a bit off meta with Crystal on the flex DPS slot, Stage 3 was a return to normalcy. Crystal, out of nowhere, was completely gone, and because of this, Adora took the reins and the team played GOATs almost exclusively. Luckily it worked out pretty well. Adora was never a super flashy DPS player, but he's smart and plays a nice supportive playstyle, which is honestly ideal for Brig. We also saw Godsby really start coming into his own on Zarya, and Gushui was destroying. I feel like I have to say this again. Gushui in Primal Rage, which eventually became known as the Primal Blade, is unlike anything we've ever seen.
Gushui's doing that even better though with the Primal Rage. He's in a good spot. I'd say someone call the Popo, but they're right there. They need to stop the Spark from taking this. Gushui, meanwhile, just scattering the Valiant across the entire map. Izayaki.
Stop. He's chased down or removed by Gushui, so the Spark at least get the point back. But there's still 4 players making 3 hydration over the edge now as well. Gushui.
There's a Primal Rage pulling after Costa, who's in a little bit of trouble trying to fly to safety, but he can't quite do it. Gushui is so good at chasing people down with that Primal Rage. Finally cast that balls, and this is it. This is the Primal Blade. This is why everyone fears Gushui's Winston.
Remember those communication and synergy issues in Stage 1? They were completely gone at this point. The Spark played like a well-oiled machine with Gushui at the helm, and no one in Stage 3 was able to stand up to them. Except, of course, the Titans, but whatever, they're the Titans. The Hangzhou Spark finished 6-1 in Stage 3, allowing them into the stage playoffs once again as the 3rd seed. However, this time the Spark would be on the receiving end of the upset. Hangzhou was matched up against the Valiant, and I'm sure the Spark knew going into it that the Valiant preferred to play off-meta. I'm talking the Sombra, the From Mercy, that kind of stuff. So Hangzhou decided that to counter it, they would also go off-meta, and they just didn't look quite as comfortable. The Valiant managed to edge out the Spark in a 3-2 victory, sending them home once again. The Spark were so close to being true contenders, but something, whether it was nerves or something else, continued to hold them back. With Stage 4 came Roll Lock, which meant DPS was back on the menu. If we're going by history, that means it's time for Crystal to come back in, right? He's a DPS with a lot more pop-off potential than Adora. A DPS lineup of him and Godsby would be something special. But it would never happen, because Crystal was suspended indefinitely. The information around this story is kind of confusing to decipher, but here's what I can tell. According to the Spark management, and thanks to this article by .esports, Crystal hadn't been taking Overwatch League as seriously as the team wanted him to, often missing scrims and VOD reviews, and the scrims that he did show up to, apparently he went in with a fairly toxic mindset. This kind of behavior had the staff angry at him already, but apparently he asked for a 10-day leave of absence from the team to go home for personal reasons, and of course the Spark allowed him to do so. However, Crystal stayed home past those 10 days without requesting to extend his leave of absence, despite the team trying to get in contact with him. So yeah, a bunch of things that added up and ended with Crystal never being able to represent Hangzhou again. And that sucks, because that means the team was forced to run Adora on Mei in Stage 4, which wasn't great. Again, Adora is a smart, supportive player, but you can't count on him to pop off, like, ever. Godsby got the chance to stretch his legs on his signature sniper characters like Widow and Hanzo, but it was tough for the rest of the team. I mean, Guxue couldn't do very much in Orisa Jail, so a lot of the time the pressure fell to the supports to give the rest of the team room to work. And unfortunately, the reason that I haven't really talked about Bebe so far in this video is because he was painfully average all season long. Other than Godsby occasionally popping off, the Spark couldn't do much individually, so they relied on their built-up synergy over the season, and it kinda worked. The Spark couldn't do much against the teams with superstar level DPS players, but a 4-3 record in Stage 4 was more than enough to keep pace. In fact, that's something that the Spark did very well this season. Keeping pace. After Stage 1, the Spark were always up there. Never the best, but better than most. That's why it's no surprise that the Hangzhou Spark finished their inaugural season with an impressive record of 18-10, which is more than enough to get them into the playoffs as the 4th seed. Did most think that the Spark would be taking home the trophy? No. However, the Spark had been knocking on the door of a true breakthrough all season long. If there was any time to do it, it was right now. Going into a Doomfist meta, we saw Bazi taking the stage again, as Doomfist is actually one of his strongest heroes. Now that that swap was confirmed, Hangzhou's first game of the postseason was against the 5th-seeded Gladiators. And I gotta say, this was a really good game. Godsby vs Surefour on Reaper, Hydration vs Bazi on Doomfist, Rhea vs Void, and also Hydration on Sigma. Yeah, this game was a lot of fun to watch. The teams battled back and forth, had pop-off after pop-off. The Gladiators went up 3-1, and Hangzhou fought back. But in the end, it was the LA Gladiators who barely, and I mean barely, managed to pull the game out 4-3, sending the Spark down to the losers bracket early. But this is where they began their tear. First down were the Dynasty, who put up a decent fight but couldn't come up clutch when it really mattered. Hangzhou wins 4-1. Then it was the Reign, still riding high after an upset against a Shock. Hangzhou crashed that hype train really quick. Again, a close series, but the Spark were coming up clutch again and again, and they won 4-0. But then the Spark went up against the San Francisco Shock in the losers semifinals, and they had no choice but to respect that team. They may have been red hot, but the Shock were white hot, and had an understanding of the new Sigma Orisa meta that no one else could match. Hangzhou couldn't do anything to prevent them from eventually winning the title. But there's definitely no shame in going down like that. The Hangzhou Spark finished Overwatch League Season 2 in 4th place overall. In Season 2 of the Overwatch League, there is a perceived big three of Overwatch League teams who sat at the top of the standings. Those teams are, of course, the Shock, the Titans, and the Excelsior. But who was number 4? Well, by regular season and playoff standings, that would be the Spark. So why doesn't it feel like fans took them as seriously? Well, Hangzhou had a lot of hype in the preseason due to their branding, but not as much from the players other than Guxue. They started off their season rough, and I think it was at that point that many fans, including myself, dismissed the Spark. They're just the cute pink anime team that spams emojis on Twitter. How much could they possibly do? But the Spark refused to let their entire existence be defined by that. The team practiced, improved, and grew. Like, I don't think there's any other team this season that grew as much as the Spark did. We saw players like Guxue, Rhea, IDK, and Godsby really come into their own. And that's why this team really does have my respect. Sure, they attracted fans initially through their marketing and their game day posters, but they got them to stay because of their explosive gameplay. That's why my final grade for the Hangzhou Spark in Season 2 of the Overwatch League is an A-. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed looking back at Hangzhou's season as much as I did. How do you think the Spark will perform in Season 3? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you like this video, leave a like, and if you want to be notified for every new video I upload, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell. I really do appreciate it. Man, look at this wheel. In episode 1, we had 19 teams on here, now we're down to 2. Which unlucky fanbase has to wait until the very end for a video? Let's find out. The LA Gladiators. Finally! This team made some big moves going into Season 2. Did it pay off? Find out on the penultimate episode of Season in Review. Until then though, don't get tilted.